we have the Android Studio installed. Android Studio, I can say that disadvantage, it's slow a little bit. It's not fast like Eclipse because you have many packages are all linked together to help you to develop the app. So as you can see, I have a big list of apps here that I work on. Now, I can start a new Android Studio. It's actually these files on the left side that we see once we develop an app. You will have what we call Android manifest.xml. Inside this file, there is a description for all the components of Android apps. It's ready by the Android at runtime system, and we read it at runtime to execute. So we're not going to go to Android manifest.xml and modify it in any of the labs. But it's good to know that inside the Android manifest, it will find all the description about the component of your apps. And once you run the app, at runtime, the Android Studio will go and read this manifest for you. Now, this is where most of the work will be done, inside the Java folders. Inside the Java folder, which is inside the source /Java, so it's inside another folder, but once you have the Android view on the top here, Android view, you will have the Java. As you can see, there is a 3 subfolders. There is a Java, which is the com.example.ecs1022, and then .0, which is the folder where all the classes you develop will be stored. There is Android test, and there is a test directories. In this course, we're going to work with the test directory, and also we're going to work with the Java directory. Android test, we're not going to work with it. It's for advanced if you want to make a test scenario for your app. Now, inside also the file structures, you will have the resources directory. Most of the files inside the resources directory are .xml files. And as you can see, we have a drawable directories. And you're going to use these drawable in the first apps to store images. So if you app going to use some images, the link for this will be inside drawables directories. And we have a layout directories. A layout directory, inside it, as you can see, we have activity_0.xml file. This layout file will be responsible about describing the user interface items that you add to the app. So if you add buttons, you have text field, you have edit text field, you have a display text, you have a scroll bar or whatever is you adding to your app as a user interface items, it will be stored inside the layout.xml. And inside the layout XML, you will find the XML code describe actually the appearance and how this user interface item will appear inside the apps. Also, you can see there is a values folders. You're going to use this during the lab 0. When you develop the app 0, you're going to use the colors and also the string, and we have the styles. The style is allow us to develop a style that control all the most of the user interface items. So we don't need to go and visit each user interface items and change their properties in terms of the styles and appearance. We can define a style, and then we use this style for most of the users to make it more easier for us. A string is allow us to make our app more adaptive for multi-language. So you can define some string on different languages. You have string.xml to do this for you. So rather than fixing the value or the caption of the buttons on your apps, you can make this caption as a parameters. And then inside string.xml, you can change the value of this parameter based on the language. Now, This is a Griddle. We're not going to go to any of the Griddle scripts. This is a Griddle script offered by Android Studio. Once you create your apps, it will be staying the same, okay? But I believe for the students who are going to install the early version of Android Studio, they need to fix something on that so to be able to run with the newer versions. But anyway, you Google it and you will find it out. Now, to set up a virtual machine or a virtual device that can run your app, you just, as you saw, just simply run the app. It will give you all the virtual device that you can run. If you don't want to set up a virtual devices, the only option for you is to connect your real Android device to your machine, and you can download the informations or the apps on the real device right now. Run, you pick the virtual, and then you will see the apps. Some Android terminologies, it's what we call is an activity. Activity is actually the screen. When you run the app, this screens with all the user interface on it is called activity. It's linked to an activity class, as you saw in the development. And anything you put it inside is called a view. And this appears on the screen of activity. And the view, there is a widget, and this is a graphical user interface, and could be the widget buttons, text field, view text field, you put it. We're gonna drag and drop this graphical user and put it inside your display. A widget is, we call it a view objects, and it allows us to interact with the users. Now, we could have buttons, checkboxes, text view, or edit text, and etc. from the widgets. Now, normally, when you organize your app, you try to put these widgets together on what we call a view groups. You group them together to control the positions, the locations, the locks of these widgets inside your apps. You can have a group within a group, everything on the hierarchical structures. Now, to be able to sort out the widgets all, you need what we call a layout manager. And this layout manager, we have many layout managers offered by the Android Studio. We have layout, linear layout, where you organize the widget linearly or horizontally, verticals, sorry, or horizontals. Tables, where you organize in the tabular formats relative to each other. So whenever you change the one widget, the other one will be relatively changed to it. Or absolute locations, so the buttons and the view, the graphical user interface are fixed locations. It will not change if you rotate the app or the tablet or something like that. And there is also a frame that is dynamically generate the widget inside the frame. There is also a list view, scroll items, or the grid view. As you can see, this is a different layout sample of them, linear verticals, and you have a relatives to each other's list widgets, and also the grid. But the ones that we're going to work with for all these semesters, it's called the constraint layout. Constraint layout is the default one offered by the Android Studio, and you're going to work with the default one. Okay? And this, all the item would be located inside this layout managers, and you cannot have outside this layout managers any widgets. And you can also add another layout managers inside this. Like for example, you're gonna see in some apps you developed in this semesters, you have the constraint layout managers, and inside it you put a linear layout managers. Okay, so you can put a layout manager inside another layout managers. So you can have a constraint layout manager, inside it you have a tabular layout managers, okay, or a list layout managers. Everything in hierarchical levels. Now, also there is Android Studio terminology. Events. When you have the app and there is a buttons inside the app, so the end user will press these buttons. pressing these buttons or scrolling down or swipe your fingers or touching to any things, it will generate or fire things. And this we call it an event. It's an action appear when the user interact with the widgets. And now how the user can interact with the widgets, it's already default and programmed for us. So you can see that when you have the buttons inside your app, there is a way for the user to interact with the buttons. For example, you can press these buttons. Is that right? You can, once the user is just putting a finger on the top of the buttons, not pressing it, we can give a hint message, okay? So you can interact with the widgets in a certain way. It's already programmed and designed for us. If you need this functionality, you link this action with some Java methods you develop. So once the user press the buttons, you do some actions. You print a message for the users, you start browsing to see the image, to send a message, whatever is it. They have also an action bar. Sometimes some apps, we have an actions bar common on the top. You can select from them. And there is a notification area. Sometimes some apps, you see, there is a notification area always in the button, some of them on the middle of the screen, okay? So there is a notification area, you can set up it where you notify the users about that. Now, in this course, most likely we're going to interact with the three most common widgets that we're going to work with. The one that is used for the labeling, which is the text view. And this text view, we're going to use it to just display a message to the user. What is the message that we're going to display to the user? We have initial message, we design it for it, but inside the programming, we can change this message. We can grab this widget inside the Java programming and change the message during the execution of the app. And as you can see on the palette of the widgets, it's called text view, and this on the Android lingo, we have also, it's called text view, because now we have the view and we have the programming from the Java. So in this case, the Android is called a text view and the Java is also called a text view. And once you add any widgets to your app, the app will give an ID, and this ID is unique for any widgets. So you can grab this widget in the Java programming and interact with this because it's a unique. Okay, we have the text box. Text box, it's a little bit different. Text box, it's used for the user to input something for our app. For example, we ask the user to put his height, his weight, okay? We need the text box. And now we see the difference. In the palette of the Android Studio, you see it as a plain text. We name it in the theory as a text box. But on the Java, you have edit text. So you have to be familiar with this kind of names. So text box, plain text, edit text, all of them have the same issue. But where you are using it, if you are programming and you want to interact with the text box, you have to use edit text because this is where the name of the Java class is. The Java expert, they name it as a text, edit text. But on the Android Studio, when you design your layout, they call it a plain text. Okay? The third one, which is the button, is the same thing. It's on the Android lingo is a buttons. On the Android also is a buttons. You drag and drop inside your view. Now, how to build and design the app's user interface. All these next slides is actually from the textbook, which is related to Android Studio, app D0, which is you're supposed to do it by yourself. And this is the first class. I go over these just to highlight more information. I know this is the first class. Most of you will be surprised what is this, but once you visit the labs, once you start install the Android Studio and work with the D0, you will be familiar with everything. And this slide will be used by you as a reference to go over it. Whenever you design anything inside your app, you go to the what we call activity_main.xml. Now, if you install the new version, it will be always activity_main. If you store the previous version, the same version on the labs, you will be able to change it with any name you like. Okay? And as you can see, you drag, drop from the palette any widget you like, you put it inside the view, and you can interact with the parameters here. There is two ways to do this. We're not going to do the hard way, which is the code way, where once we generate the apps, we're going to go to the Java and learn how we can generate the Java graphical user interface. No, we're going to build all the interface we like on the apps, and we're going to use XML. Okay? And you can also, in the second way, XML, you can drag and drop, or you can go to the XML and type by yourself. Most of the time, you will find it convenient to drag and drop and change the parameters or the probabilities from the list of the probabilities without going to the XML and change it. But there's some information we need to know it about XML. It's very essential and elementary. So, as you can see, let me just go to the it's last 5 minutes. Okay. Okay. So I will double click here on the XML. It allows me to see the view. This is the view that you have. You can here, for example, see the blueprint with the design. The blueprint is exactly how it's look on the real device, but let us always stick with the design. As you can see, I have the hello world. I can delete this. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. For example, in the D0, we ask you to drag and drop the buttons inside the design. This is the buttons. We drag it and drop. I just make it a little bit large so everybody can see this. So in the left side here, you have the probabilities about these buttons. One of these probabilities, as you can see here on the tree, component tree, it's the constraint layout is the one on the top, big one. And inside this constraint layout, we put all the views we like. All the views we like, we put it inside this constraint layout. Now, you can just simply hold this green circle and link it to the top. This will make sure that the button is constrained to the top of your app. Or you can go to this screen. This screen will allow you to do all this job by just clicking on this. Now, if you would like, now this button is constrained to the top in all the directions on the screen. You can, in the D0, will ask you to add more buttons, link them together, relatively align them together, so when you do rotations of your cell phone to the landscape, still the buttons are in the view and well organized. Now, there's two arrows. You can go back and forth between the full list of the parameters. You can control the background of the buttons, and you have the colors are red, green, blue, range from 0, 0. For example, this is the black background. You can control the text. I will switch back to the slide just to show you that all these informations that you're going to do on the D0 is already on the slide. So these slides will consider for you as a reference. So you can see here, this is the activity main.xml, and you have the design view. This is the text view. This is the hello world, and you can do the constraint. This is the two arrows. You can switch between them to see the full parameters list. So this is the full parameter list. You can constraint whenever you have, this is the constraint layout. You can see the constraint layout and you see how they are constrained. You can constrain the buttons. As you can see, once you start the apps, the buttons is already linked to the left and right. Okay. So I will stop right now, but please look at this slide once I post it. The materials inside it is there, and next lectures I will start to highlight some issues about this, and at that time I hope you will gain more experience on the Android Studio.
Where do we find this presentation?
Right now the presentation is not available on the Moodle,
Also,
but
it's
it will